The theme of inner reform leads us to deeply reflect on our journey towards spiritual transformation. We often wonder, why don't pure spirits deliver lectures in the Spiritist movement? Wouldn't it be easier if an angel were guiding us? But there's a clear reason for this. If angels took on tasks meant for us, there would be no room for our growth. They would occupy all the roles, leaving us, as evolving spirits, without the opportunity to improve. Inner reform is our responsibility, our chance to grow. This is why those who teach are still learning, just like the rest of us. Inner reform doesn't require perfection before action. Imagine a plane that's already in the air, needing repairs mid-flight. That's how life works. We can't pause our responsibilities to focus only on self-improvement. Life moves forward, and it's within that movement that we transform. God doesn't expect us to be perfect before fulfilling our duties. He knows that through practicing good and honoring our responsibilities, we improve. Our current incarnation is a tool for growth, and we must embrace this process with clarity and peace. The key to inner reform is not waiting until we're ready. It's about starting now, trusting that as we act, our spirit will be shaped. Every effort, every charitable act, transforms us, even in subtle ways. This is the lesson Jesus left us. Jesus, born in a humble manger, taught that it doesn't matter where we come from or what imperfections we carry. What matters is the path we choose. We are immortal spirits, destined for happiness and purity, and inner reform is how we reach that goal. Even if we start from imperfection, the important thing is to begin. We don't need to wait until we're better to act. Acting is how we improve. This is the essence of inner reform. Constant transformation through work and faith. Jesus could have chosen pure spirits as his companions, but instead, he chose men like Peter. Why? Because living among imperfect people provides the best opportunities for growth. If we were surrounded by perfection, it would be hard to relate. Human relationships, filled with mistakes and successes, are where we improve. The secret of inner reform is to begin now, with patience and peace. Spiritual evolution is ongoing, and we shouldn't turn this process into a struggle. Life should be lived with serenity, taking every opportunity for growth. We are always progressing, always transforming. Inner reform can't be delayed, and waiting for perfection isn't an option. It's like renovating a house while living in it. Life continues as we change, learn, and grow. One of the gospel's greatest lessons is that God doesn't expect us to be perfect before fulfilling our duties. On the contrary, through our actions and responsibilities, we move closer to perfection. Our incarnation is the tool for spiritual growth, and it's essential to understand this. If we wait to be better before starting, we'll be disappointed. The truth is that as we commit to our tasks, both spiritual and material, the work itself transforms us. Serving others is a form of self-education. Often, without noticing, each day of work brings us closer to becoming more evolved spirits. This is why Jesus, born in a humble manger and raised in the modest village of Bethlehem, gave us such a powerful lesson. He showed us that where we come from or how imperfect we are doesn't matter. The starting point doesn't determine the outcome. We are all immortal spirits, created for happiness and purity, and our journey toward purification begins with the tools at hand. The true secret of inner reform is this: even if the beginning is humble or imperfect, what matters is starting. As Jesus demonstrated, the effort to progress is what counts, not where we begin. We are destined for spiritual purity and joy, and this destiny is fulfilled through small, daily acts. Imagine if Jesus had chosen 12 pure spirits as his apostles. That journey would likely have been flawless, but would we have learned anything from them? Could we relate to such perfection? The answer is no. Christ's work would have been perfect, but far from our reality. We wouldn't have been able to identify or learn. That's why Jesus chose ordinary, flawed men like Peter. Peter, who doubted and made mistakes, was chosen to lead not because he was perfect, but because following Christ was his path to transformation. Living among imperfect beings is vital for growth. It would be hard to live with someone perfect, as they would always remind us of our flaws. The beauty of human relationships is in the exchange, the mutual learning. We all make mistakes, and that's natural. This is why inner reform must be carried out in an atmosphere of peace, accepting our imperfections and recognizing that spiritual evolution is a long journey. If we treat this journey as a constant battle, always demanding perfection, it becomes heavy and frustrating. Spiritual growth is a process of acceptance and steady progress. Only God is perfect. Spirits are always evolving, learning, and improving, and that includes all of us. Inner reform happens gradually, and the important thing is to keep moving forward. Moving forward, even if the steps are small. One of the key aspects of inner reform is the ability to recognize our own imperfections. Without this, there can be no improvement. Blindness to our flaws is a major obstacle on the path of evolution. Just as Peter, who, despite walking alongside Jesus, had moments of doubt and denial, we must learn to clearly see our defects. We can only improve what we acknowledge as flawed. Honesty with ourselves is the first step in inner reform. There is no use hiding or downplaying our defects. True transformation begins when we look inside ourselves and accept our limitations, knowing that with time and effort, we can overcome them. It's important to remember that God doesn't love us any less because we're imperfect. God's love is unconditional. Just as a mother loves her child despite flaws, God loves us as we are. Divine love doesn't wait for us to be perfect. It embraces us at every stage of our journey. This love gives us the strength to move forward. Another essential principle of inner reform is learning to bloom where God has placed us. Often, we wait for ideal circumstances before committing to our transformation. However, true progress happens now, in the present conditions. God places us in specific situations for our learning and growth. We don't need to wait for a perfect garden to bloom. Growth is always possible, even in challenging conditions. Each of us has a role to play where we are, and through this role, we carry out our inner reform. Blooming where we are planted is an act of humility and trust in God's plans. Even in difficult situations, there's always an opportunity for growth and learning. Our current circumstances are often God's last hope for that environment. We are instruments of transformation, and by fulfilling our role with love, we help bring light to the world around us. Inner reform is not just a personal pursuit. It involves active work, involvement with others, and fulfilling our responsibilities. We can't wait for perfect conditions or choose only tasks that please us. True spiritual progress happens through work. Working for the good doesn't just change the environment around us, it transforms us. Every act of charity, every service done with love, helps reform our own spirit. And this work must happen in any situation, without waiting for ideal conditions. The secret is to work with what we have, where we are. Inner reform is like fixing a plane in mid-flight. Life keeps moving, and we must make adjustments while continuing to live and serve. True transformation occurs in this constant movement. This process requires patience, discipline, and humility. Inner reform is not about immediate achievements but gradual progress. Every small step forward is a victory, and every mistake is an opportunity to learn. The key is persistence, even when progress seems slow. Indulgence plays a fundamental role in inner reform. It is the ability to view the mistakes of others, and our own, with patience and understanding. No one is perfect, and we are all in the process of growth. Being indulgent means accepting that just as we fail, others fail too. Indulgence is one of the most important aspects of charity because it allows peaceful coexistence with others and with ourselves. Inner reform cannot happen without a compassionate view of imperfections, both ours and others. All relationships require indulgence. In family, work, or social life, imperfections will manifest. Without indulgence, these moments become sources of conflict instead of growth. Indulgence turns coexistence into a tool for mutual improvement, where we learn from each other's mistakes. We must also be indulgent with ourselves. Excessive self-criticism can become an obstacle on the journey of inner reform. We need to accept our limitations and be patient with our own progress. Throughout the process of inner reform, selfishness and personal interest present major challenges. Even in good deeds, the ego can seek recognition or personal gain. True servants of Christ act without expecting rewards or applause. In Greek mythology, the story of Narcissus, who fell in love with his own reflection, teaches the danger of becoming obsessed with ourselves. We can forget the true purpose of spiritual life: selfless service and communion with God. The curtain of the self, as Emmanuel calls it, is one of the greatest obstacles to evolution. The ego creates a barrier between us and others, blinding us to life's bigger picture. It drives us to act out of self-interest. When we fall in love with our own image, we lose sight of others and the true purpose of spiritual work. Inner reform requires us to remove this curtain and act with detachment. True charity is done without expectation of anything in return, motivated only by love and the desire to serve. The spiritual journey is a path of detachment, where we learn to prioritize others over our own interests. Throughout this journey, suffering and pain present themselves as instruments of learning and transformation. Death and suffering are the great levelers of life. No matter how much someone has achieved materially, spiritually, or socially, suffering reminds us of the fragility of the human condition and the need for evolution. Suffering forces us to reflect on our attitudes, choices, and behavior. It places us in a state of humility, where we are called to recognize our imperfections and seek to improve. Pain often drives us to pursue inner reform with more determination and focus. Just as death makes us all equal, suffering opens our eyes to the truth. It forces us to look beyond ourselves, to view others with more compassion, and to question the true purpose of our existence. Inner reform is not a pain-free process. On the contrary, through difficulties, we grow. But suffering is not an end in itself. It is a means of transformation. When faced with faith, suffering leads us to a greater state of evolution and closeness to God. One of the greatest lessons of inner reform is that we are not alone on this journey. Human relationships are essential to our evolutionary process. Every person we meet is an opportunity for learning, and every relationship teaches us about ourselves and others. Inner reform cannot be achieved in isolation. It is through contact with others, with their imperfections and virtues, that we learn patience, forgiveness, and love. Relationships test us to put Christ's teachings into practice. Every relationship is a mirror reflecting our imperfections. As we deal with others' flaws, we confront our own. Community life shows us who we really are and how much we need to improve. Just as Jesus lived with imperfect apostles, we are called to live in community, accepting others' imperfections as tools for our improvement. Human relationships are, without a doubt, the greatest laboratory for inner reform. As we progress on this journey, it is essential to remember that we are deeply loved by God, regardless of our imperfections. No fault or mistake diminishes the divine love that has followed us since the creation of our spirits. This unconditional love sustains us in moments of doubt, assuring us that, no matter how many times we fail, we always have a chance to start again. Just as a mother does not stop loving her child despite their imperfections, God does not stop loving us. God's love is not conditional on perfect performance. It is a love that envelopes and welcomes us at every stage of our evolution. This love lights our way, especially when we feel lost or incapable of progressing. Recognizing this truth is key to inner reform, as it frees us from guilt and helps us walk more lightly. We know we are always under God's loving gaze, which gives us the strength to keep working, even when we stumble. Divine love doesn't demand perfection to act. It calls us to be better each day, step by step. Inner reform requires us to look within and face the shadows in our spirit. Among these shadows, selfishness, pride, and self-interest are the main obstacles to our evolution. Kardec taught that, beyond visible vices and imperfections, self-interest characterizes the imperfect spirit. Selfishness makes us prioritize our desires above others, blocking our growth. It is the opposite of charity and love. Pride prevents us from seeing our flaws, making us believe we are better than others. And self-interest distorts even good actions, as we often expect something in return. True spiritual progress happens when we act selflessly, practicing charity without seeking recognition. Serving others with genuine love and desire to do good is a constant challenge. But with patience, discipline, and faith, we can overcome these tendencies. Inner reform is a long process, but every small victory counts. Every act of love, every humble gesture, brings us closer to purity and happiness. Emmanuel warns us of one great challenge: spiritual narcissism. Just as Narcissus fell in love with his reflection, many of us are seduced by the idea of perfection or the praise we receive. This creates the curtain of the self, a barrier that prevents us from seeing reality and progressing. Obsessing over our image or achievements blinds us to life's true purpose, connection with God and service to others. Spiritual egoism is a major obstacle to progress, leading us to believe we are further ahead than we are. Inner reform requires us to remove this curtain and see ourselves as we truly are, spirits in evolution, with much to learn. Humility is needed at every stage, knowing there's always something to perfect. When we turn our gaze from ourselves to others, we begin the true journey of transformation. The curtain of ego distances us not only from others but also from God. Only by recognizing our imperfections and selflessly dedicating ourselves to doing good can we lift this curtain and truly connect with the divine. One of the greatest tools that God offers us for inner reform is human interaction. Life in society, with all its challenges, is a true laboratory for evolution. Every person we meet, whether a family member, friend, co-worker, or even a stranger, is an opportunity for learning. It is in interacting with others that our flaws are tested. Patience is tried in the small irritations of daily life, indulgence is exercised in the faults of others, and humility is challenged when we encounter the virtues of others. Every human relationship is a chance to put Christ's teachings into practice and to actively work on our inner reform. Life in society offers constant opportunities for growth. Every conflict, disagreement, and challenge is a chance to learn and evolve. The key is to face these situations with humility and patience, recognizing that we are all on the same path, each fighting our own internal battles. The gospel teaches us to love our neighbor as ourselves. That is the great challenge of human coexistence. Loving others, with their flaws and imperfections, is one of the greatest acts of charity we can practice. It is also one of the greatest lessons that inner reform teaches us. The journey of inner reform is long and often difficult. There will be moments of failure, times when we feel discouraged or incapable of making progress. But it's important to remember, ***, God never abandons us. ***, He is always by our side, offering the strength and support we need to keep going. Perseverance is essential on this path. Even if progress is slow, the important thing is not to give up. Every effort counts, and every small victory brings us closer to our final goal. Inner reform is not a goal that is achieved all at once. It's a continuous process that accompanies us throughout life. The key is to keep moving forward, even when the results aren't immediately visible. Spiritual transformation is a silent and gradual work, but it is a work that, day by day, makes us better. As Jesus taught us, it's not about how fast we walk the path, but our consistency. If we keep our eyes fixed on the good, if we continue to serve with love and humility, we will one day reach the purity and happiness that await us as immortal spirits. Along the journey of inner reform, we encounter two great challenges that can divert us from the path: selfishness and pride. Allan Kardec reminds us that if we set aside visible vices and imperfections, what most characterizes the imperfect spirit is personal interest. Even when we believe we are acting righteously, ego and pride often distort our intentions, leading us to act more in our own interest than for the greater good. These are the main traps in the process of evolution. Selfishness makes us believe that our needs are more important than those of others, and pride blinds us to our flaws, making us believe we are further along than we really are. To overcome these obstacles, constant vigilance and self-awareness are necessary. Kardec, in his study of superior spirits, noticed that one of the most striking qualities of pure spirits was their lack of personal interest. They always act for the common good, without expecting anything in return. This total disinterest is something rare in the world, and it is exactly this quality we need to cultivate along the way. Overcoming personal interest is a great challenge because it's deeply rooted in our nature. From an early age, we are taught to seek our own survival and happiness, often at the expense of others. But true inner reform occurs when we learn to act without expecting rewards, when we can practice charity for the simple desire to serve and help. A clear example of the challenges of inner reform is seen in the journey of the Apostle Peter. Peter was an imperfect man, with an impulsive and often reactive temperament. Even after living directly with Jesus for 3 years, he still had moments of doubt and weakness, like when he denied the Master 3 times. Yet, in his infinite wisdom, Jesus chose Peter to lead the apostles, not because he was perfect, but because he knew that the work itself would be the means of his transformation. Contrary to what many might imagine, Jesus did not choose impeccable leaders, but ordinary men with flaws and limitations. He showed us that inner reform is accessible to all and that perfection is not a prerequisite for serving the good. Peter is a living example of how inner reform is a long-term process, marked by successes and failures. He had moments of weakness, but he also demonstrated great courage and faith. Walking with Jesus, he shaped his character, learned from his mistakes, and gradually became a leader capable of guiding his brothers in faith. This example teaches us that inner reform does not happen suddenly. It is the result of a long journey, of constant work, of moments of failure and overcoming. What matters is the willingness to continue, even when we fail, trusting that the work itself will transform us. One of the main driving forces of inner reform is love. True love, the kind that expects nothing in return, is what propels us forward. It helps us forgive, accept the imperfections of others, and deal with our own limitations. When we act with love, the process of transformation becomes lighter, as we begin to see life and people from a new perspective. Love is also the element that connects us directly to God. Jesus taught us that the greatest commandment is to love God above all things and to love our neighbor as ourselves. This teaching, simple in its essence, is the key to inner reform. By developing unconditional love, we move ever closer to perfection. However, the love that guides us in inner reform is not selfish or possessive love. It is a love that understands, that accepts, that imposes no conditions. It is the love that is reflected in charity, in indulgence, and in patience with the weaknesses of others and ourselves. This kind of love transforms us because it leads us out of ourselves, setting aside selfishness and pride. It helps us see others as brothers on the journey, and ourselves as evolving spirits, all seeking the same destiny of happiness and purity. Inner reform is a continuous process, extending throughout life and across multiple incarnations. There is no final point where we can say, "I am ready, I have achieved perfection." Spiritual evolution is infinite, and there will always be something to learn and improve. This idea may seem challenging, but it also brings great freedom. We don't need to be perfect now. What matters is that we are always in motion, always seeking to improve, and always willing to learn from our mistakes. Each small victory on the path of self-transformation counts, and every effort made with love and dedication brings us a little closer to God. This is why inner reform must be approached with serenity and peace. There is no need for haste, anxiety, or excessive self-criticism. Progress is inevitable for those who are willing to work and learn. And the most important thing is to stay on the path, with faith and perseverance. Often, we fall into the trap of thinking we can only transform ourselves in ideal conditions, right? We wait for the perfect moment, the perfect environment, the perfect circumstances. But true inner reform happens where we are, with the challenges and opportunities life offers us now. It is essential to learn to bloom where God has planted us. Each of us has been placed in a specific situation, a family, a job, or a community, for reasons we may not fully understand, right? But it is in this environment that we find the tools for our evolution. Blooming where we are means accepting the place where God has put us and working to transform not only ourselves, but also the environment around us. No matter how difficult the situation may be, there is always an opportunity for learning and service. This acceptance does not mean passive resignation, but an active attitude of seeking the best in ourselves in any circumstance. By embracing the present, with its challenges and imperfections, we open ourselves to the spiritual transformation that life offers us every day. On the journey of inner reform, it is crucial to understand that spiritual evolution is not spontaneous or easy. It requires discipline and perseverance. Often, the desire to act according to our lower inclinations is strong, and it is precisely in these moments that discipline helps us stay the course. Just like a farmer who tends to his crops every day, watering and pruning, we must care for our souls. Spiritual progress does not happen overnight. It is the result of small actions, repeated daily. Discipline keeps us on the right path, even when the journey seems difficult or when we feel discouraged. Perseverance teaches us not to give up. There will be moments of failure, of weakness, and that is part of the process. But the important thing is not to abandon the effort. Each time we fall, we have the opportunity to get back up and try again, with more wisdom and strength. Perseverance is the virtue that drives us forward, even when the results are not yet visible. As mentioned earlier, love is the driving force of inner reform. It is the fuel that moves us to act with patience, understanding, and compassion. Love is the key to overcoming selfishness, pride, and personal interest. True love makes us place the well-being of others above our own desires. It inspires us to serve without expecting anything in return, to forgive when we are hurt, and to be indulgent with the faults of others. Love is what connects us directly to God, for God is love in its purest and most perfect form. However, the love that guides inner reform is not possessive or selfish. It is a free love that accepts imperfections and sees the divinity in every being. This love transforms us, for in loving truly, we step outside of ourselves and move closer to our divine essence. The secret of inner reform lies in consistency, in love, and in patience. It is a process that requires discipline, but it must also be carried out with serenity and peace. We do not need to become perfect immediately. What matters is to always keep moving forward, always willing to learn from our mistakes, and to improve each day. Inner reform is a journey we take alongside God. He is by our side, guiding us, supporting us every step of the way, and His unconditional love sustains us, even in the moments of greatest difficulty. We are not alone, and we can trust that, with time and effort, we will achieve the purity and happiness that is our destiny as immortal spirits. Let us, then, move forward, with courage, faith, and hope, knowing that each small victory on the path of inner reform is a great achievement in the spiritual realm. And above all, may we love and serve with all our hearts, for it is in love and service that we find the true essence of life.